Good morning. I was told to hold this, which causes a tripping hazard, so if that happens at any point, you promise not to laugh at me, please, because it will likely happen. I also talk with my hands, which means at some point it might go with it, and I also apologize for that. It is great to be here. In the few day and a half that I've been here, I've learned a couple of things. One, you have the best ice cream, specifically that has orange in it, and if you can sit on a beach while you eat it, for some reason that makes it taste better. So definitely have the best ice cream. You have a lot of turtles. I've shown off a picture that I'm very proud of a giant turtle that we saw. So if you haven't seen that, when we went scuba diving yesterday, you got to see it. It's amazing. It's about the size of that table, and it blew me away. Supposedly you have them crawl up on beaches here and lay eggs, which sounds pretty amazing. I also learned, and I wasn't very happy about this one, I also learned that what I call vacation, Tracy calls work, and so I'm still kind of dealing with that one, that he gets to live here. So this morning, and in fact today and tomorrow, we're going to be talking a lot about the younger generation, about millennials. How can the church, how can Christians, how can we reach this younger generation? It's almost impossible. It seems as if churches today have fewer and fewer young people stepping up, wanting to attend. And so what can the church do to attract, to develop, to transform these younger minds, the future of the church? And then when we think about it that way, the importance of it just magnifies. Because this is the future. Now, I think God is going to take care of his people no matter what. But, I mean, we're talking about the future, the existence of the church. How can we bring in these young people in? I'm not an expert. I'm 25 years old, so by no means am I an expert. But I'm a young person, and I'm a young person in the church. So I would say by that I have some experience, but that's about it. So you can take what I say or you can leave it. This is all just off of my experience and things that I've read, people I've talked to. Tracy mentioned I have a podcast on this. Me and a couple of others, we just chat about it. We looked at some research about it, but again, I'm not an expert. And honestly, I'm not going to be telling you anything that you don't already know. And that's one of the main things is I'm not revealing anything to you. If anything, I'm just reminding you of what you already know. Or I'm helping maybe connect the dots of the importance of it. But in fact of having an epiphany or having some kind of program that you can purchase for $200 and apply here at the church, and it's going to bring all of the young people here, I don't have any of that. Now, if you want to give me $200, that's fine. I'd love to take that. But that's about all I have to offer, right? It all comes down to, here it is, right? I could basically say these two words and sit down and we could just go done, have lunch, go eat some ice cream on the beach. All we have to do is focus on our culture and our intentionality. If we can do that, we can focus on what type of culture are we trying to create here in the churches. And I say here, and if I say anything that sounds a little aggressive, I'm not saying against your church directly. I'm talking about the church in general and my experience in it. So nothing I say is against Vero Beach Church of Christ. I don't know you as well. I don't know the program you have. I don't know what you do in your community or how you're serving or how you're loving, but I'm just going off of the church in general. So there's my disclaimer for this talk. But if we're talking about being intentional and creating a culture, what kind of culture are we creating? How intentional are we being with younger people? This weekend it's titled Walt Disney, Google, and Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because if we can take some of these large embodiments, these cultures, and we can learn from them. Now, I've saved the best for last, Jesus, and we'll be talking about him a lot tomorrow morning. But in fact, we're going to be talking about him a lot throughout this entire weekend because Jesus is the model for us. Jesus is the example. This weekend is not about masking or trying to make up or put makeup on the gospel. I believe the gospel is just as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. I believe the good news has power to transform people's hearts, and it's just as relevant, just as prevalent, just as powerful as it's ever been. So this is not about changing the message. It's about changing the packaging. It's about changing how are we communicating the message. How are we communicating what Jesus is doing? So, again, nothing you don't know, not trying to change the message, and this is not a get-rich-quick. if we're talking about changing culture, we're talking about changing people's hearts, it takes time. And that's the reality of it, is this isn't something that you can apply on Monday and expect to have an influx of young people. It involves us making small adjustments in our life to something greater. Think about going to the gym. Whenever you first decide I'm going to the gym, you have in mind what you want to be. But you don't go to the gym the first day and become that. Well, if you did, there'd be a lot more people in the gym probably. Right? The reality is it takes small adjustments in your life, subtle shifts in your life to become what you want. You have to wake up when your alarm goes off in the morning. You have to go through a vigorous workout over and over again. You have to put down the french fries and pick up the carrots, right? All of these subtle things to get to where you want to go. It's the same thing when you want to create a culture. You do small, subtle things, and here's the greatest part, is everybody matters in it. You look at Vero Beach Church of Christ, and you think, there's a lot of people here. There's a lot of people who can do the work, but the reality is that every single one of you, and every single one of you that are not here, all of what you do matters in creating the culture here. Every little thing that you do matters, and younger people, they notice it. They notice you out in the community. They notice you whenever they come here and visit on Sunday morning. They notice you whenever you're sitting at your home and you invite them over. They notice you. And so what you do, specifically you, it matters. And this speaks directly to you. And so that's all my disclaimers. And to get us started, I want to say big influencers make small gestures to invoke big transformation. Big influencers like Google or Disney or Jesus, they make small gestures. They do small things, subtle things that from the surface seem like nothing, but when you dig down into it, you realize that all these small gestures have built up to something big. And they make big transformation. So the way that this weekend's going to be broken up, our first session is going to be on Disney, on how can we attract younger generations. So it's titled, If Disney Ran Your Church, what would it look like? So how can we, one, attract people? The second session after this one will be how can we develop young people? So how can we create a Google culture in our churches? How can we take what Google does with its employees and use that to develop young people? And then finally, how can we transform people? And that will be on Sunday. How can we transform young people with Jesus' love? So attract people with Disney magic, or develop people with Google culture, and transform people with Jesus' love. That will be broken up. I'll try to keep it within about 45 minutes, but if you ask my wife, I talk a long time. So if any point you just want to get up and leave, just get up and leave. I'll take that as my time to quit. So the first thing we have to do when talking about creating an inviting and attractive culture, a Disney culture in our churches, I think one of the first things we need to start is creating a unique experience. You see, this is all about experience, and that'll be kind of the theme on this first session, is what type of experience are we creating for young people whenever they come into our churches, or even whenever we just interact with them in public. What kind of experience are they having? You see, in our fast-paced world today, the experience is very superficial. And I'm not saying within a church, I'm saying just in general. Young people and people today, they are constantly being given superficial, manufactured, cheap experiences because it's such a fast-paced world. I mean, you think about social media, you think about television, radio, everything is going. I'm amazing. Kids don't have pricks in their necks, or their faces don't go constantly back and forth with all the ways that they're being turned. And it's produced so quickly that the depth of it is not there. They're not given any kind of depth because we don't have time to give them depth, because they want something new almost all the time. But the crazy thing is that young people, though they think they want something new all the time, what they're really seeking, what they really want is depth. Now, we've almost taken a step back from that. We think, no, we need to give them something new all the time. But whenever you talk about actually bringing in young people, and we're going to talk about this a lot, it's about bringing them into something that's already deep. Already a deep well, something that they can draw from. Whenever I was a admissions counselor at Oklahoma Christian University, my job was to convince kids to give me their money, or their parents to give me their money. I mean, that's the reality of an admissions counselor is You want them to come to your school so that you can get paid at the end of the day. So one of the ways they trained us was they talked about giving people an authentic experience. And one of the ways they showed us is by the power of a handwritten note. And the way they trained us, it's funny, they had a comic strip set up. And on the top panel, it was a guy that said like the early 90s. And he's sitting in his mail, and he's looking through, he's like, junk, spam, spam, spam. And then it paneled over, and it was him at his computer. It was bing, and he was super excited because he had a new email, right? Whenever email came out, it was a big thing. And then it goes to the panel under, and it says, today. And he's sitting at his computer, and he's spam, 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 spam. And then he opens up his mailbox, he has a letter, and bing, a handwritten note. All of a sudden, it has far more significance than it used to. Why? I think because of the intentionality behind it. Because somebody was willing to sit down and to give some depth, to make it personal, to write it down. You see, in a superficial world, in a world where things are going so fast, we don't have time anymore to sit down and make things personal. We don't have time to sit down and make things, to be intentional in what we're doing. But if you're talking about standing out, those type of things matter. So, going to Disney. How did Disney pay attention to detail? There is an extensive list of the Imagineers, the Disney guys that go in and basically create the magic in Disney. There's a long list of the details that Disney pays in making their parks a unique experience, but I'm just going to read a couple of them just to get you an idea. So the shutters in the Liberty Square, they sag. So if you go to Liberty Square and you look up at the shutters, they're actually sagging a little bit. And the question is, well, why? Well, at the time of the Revolutionary War, colonists, they would melt down the hinges and they would sell them to the British to make bullets. So to replace the hinges, they actually made leather hinges. And that caused, in colonial Revolutionary War, caused the shutters to sag a little bit. Well, Disney wanted to recreate that experience. So though their hinges aren't made out of metal, they intentionally make them sag to recreate that experience. You never would have known that if I never told you, but now you know. Right? The Liberty Bell, featured prominently in the center of Liberty Square, was cast from the same mold used to create the original. This ensures that the size and shape of the bell are absolutely identical to the historical Liberty Bell. Again, a detail. You could have stuck any bell up there, and I haven't even seen the Liberty Bell, so I'm like, oh yeah, it's a bell. It's Liberty Bell. It says so. But they made sure it was the exact same kind. Disney could save money by buying generic manholes, but they have personalized ones with the Disney logo on every single one. If you take a stroll in the exterior of the Wilderness Lodge, which I don't know if you've ever been to, there's actually footprints on the ground of all of the local animals that you find in a region that's featured after. Going back to Liberty Square, there's a nice brown stream flowing. It's a brown line flowing down the middle of the streets. In colonial times, that was acted as a urine trough to catch horse waste. They built that in, even though obviously, at least I hope not, that's a thing anymore. You can just go to the President's Hall. Get this, you go to the President's Hall and you can get attention to detail. You go to the President's Hall, Clinton, the wax figure of Clinton, is still wearing his Iron Man watch, and it has the correct time every time. All the clothing is made with the fabric that would have been used in that time era. And even Washington and Jefferson's clothes are hand-stitched. And that's just a few. We're talking about a world that Disney has created in every detailed matter. Everything walks the talk. Mm-hmm. And 99% of the people won't notice it. People who are guests there, they won't notice that the fabric is used, the same fabric in that era was used to make the president's clothes. They probably won't even notice the Mickey Mouse logo on the manhole. So why does Disney do it? Why does Disney invest the time and the money to recreate this experience? And it's because of moments like this. Because all of a sudden, Disney just became a little more magical. It just became a little more significant. It stands up a little bit more in your mind. Maybe a guest will walk in and they will look down and they will notice that Mickey Mouse logo. 99% of the people won't see it, but that one will. All of a sudden, Disney magic becomes real again. See what Disney did? All they did was pay attention to detail. The little things that hundreds of people will pass by, but they said, we're going to be intentional. And all of a sudden, everybody's ears perks up. Now I want to go to Disney World. I want to see these things. What if we could do that with the Bible? What if we could do that with the gospel? Now, I'm not saying the gospel is not already powerful. I'm not saying the gospel can't transform people, that we need to change anything about the gospel. I'm saying, what if we could make it exciting where when people go to it, they find something new, something that they thought they read hundreds of times, thought they already knew the story, but we could recreate it for them in such a way that it captures them again. What if we could do that in our Christian practice, in our spirituality? Or when people see us, they expect one thing, but they get something completely different. Handwritten notes, sweeping the leaves on Sunday, remembering a guest's name, updating our signs, our websites, our bulletins for guests. What are they expecting, and what do we give them instead? And really, this all goes and hinges, and this is what an episode of my podcast was written after, was the difference between authenticity and relevancy. Being authentic versus being relevant. And actually, this matters a lot to you, too. Right? Relevancy doesn't matter. Right? It's not about being relevant to young people. It's about being authentic that brings them in. And it does to you as well. So, an example is, I have a letter here. It's actually a very old letter. It was written between a husband and a wife. It's a letter that was passed down in my family, and gratefully they let me bring it as long as I bring it back in one piece. So you can look at it from a distance. But it's a very old letter written in the 1800s, and they would kill me if they saw me do this. But I want to take it out just to show you kind of what the letter looks like from the forefront. So again, this is a letter from the 1800s, written by, I don't know if you can hear me, between a husband and a wife. This is actually a letter written by one of our first presidents. This is a letter written between Abraham Lincoln and Mary Todd Lincoln. How I have this letter is my family actually has connections to Mary Todd, and for some reason we have this letter, and again, I'm grateful that I'm able to bring it here. But I want you to notice that as I gave you detail, and I want to do something with this, I want to bring this over. As I gave you more details, the authenticity of this letter made it more special. Right? It's no more relevant to you. Right? This letter means nothing to you. It's not about connecting to you, but the authenticity of it, the rareness of it, the uniqueness of it made it special. So here's the problem with churches and young people.
Uh-oh.
It's not really like I'm sorry. I said no people like heart attack. We can have the best intentions, but younger generations are reviewing our lives, and that's the point. We say we want to make disciples, but we oftentimes we're pew warmers. We say we want to love people and love others, but we like talking gossip in workplaces. We say we want to serve, we want to be a community that helps the poor, yet we serve every 6 months or a year or every 2 years. And the younger generations, they sniff it out. We think we're relevant, but they sniff it out. Now, you're not going to believe me now. I actually do. My family is related to Mary Todd, and we actually do have a letter. Obviously, for obvious reasons, they won't let me touch it. I'll just leave that there. Again, you probably won't believe me.
My mouth was running.
I know, everybody was. My heart beat a little faster. I thought you were about to come storm the stage. This is what younger people are attracted to. They're attracted to authenticity. It's not about being relevant. It's not about building the biggest building, having the most hip worship. It's not about being the most relevant church in their life. It's about living authentically to the way Christ told us to live. People know. People know what love looks like. People know what acceptance looks like. People know what transformed hearts look like. They know what service looks like. So what are we showing them in our lives? What are we showing them in our churches? Because the reason a lot of them are not here is because they're not seeing those things. The things that we plaster and we preach about, they're not seeing it in our lives. And again, I'm not pointing at you, I'm pointing at my experience. But I'm going to say a statement here, and again, you might storm the stage, so bear with me. Jesus was not relevant. Jesus was authentic. When you think about Jesus' method, right? Jesus did not meet the standards that people wanted him to meet. He did not say the things that people wanted to say or wanted to hear, right? He didn't do things the way people wanted him to do it. But his authenticity brought people, no matter his message. People didn't like what he said, but they wanted to hear what he had to say. People didn't like the things he was doing, but they were watching. They were curious. They were asking questions. Why? Because he wasn't relevant. He was authentic. When he said he loved and he told you to love, you saw what he meant. When he talked about being there for the poor and the widow and the sick, he was out there touching lepers and women that were bleeding. Jesus was authentic with his message. Bob Goff says in one of his new books, don't settle for typical. Young people are tired of typical. They're tired of what they're expecting. What are they expecting and what can we give them that they're not? Jesus talked about this. Matthew chapter 5. He talks about you're supposed to carry a pack 1 mile, carry it 2. You get slapped on one cheek, give them the other. What do people expect from you? Can you give them something different? You know, you built a new Chick-fil-A here, and I'm glad you finally built a place where God's resting place is. Chick-fil-A. So thank you for bringing that to Vero Beach. But we went by there this morning, and I picked up Darian a coffee. Y'all have a huge Chick-fil-A, by the way. But you know when Chick-fil-A first started, Truett Cathy sat down with the board of directors, and he went on his whiteboard and he wrote down $5.99. And he said, this is the average cost of a chicken meal that people will pay. And he wrote down $5.99. He wrote down, a line down the middle. There's 2 columns. And he said, for $5.99, what do people expect to receive? And people started spitting off things. They expect to receive $5.99 a warm meal, maybe a side with it, a smile whenever they order. They expect a drink with it, and to have a roof over their head where they can sit at a table. That's about the average thing you get for $5.99. And he said, okay, what do they not expect to get for $5.99? And the list went on. Salt and pepper to be crushed at your table, for someone to take it. A kind gesture, my pleasure. Tablecloths on the table, and other things that you can find at random Chick-fil-A's. And he wrote down all these things, and he circled it, and he said, that's who we are. Give people what they're not expecting. Create a unique experience. Be authentic. So that's number 1 of 3, so bear with me, I almost tripped there. So be relevant through your authenticity. Don't seek to be relevant, seek to be relevant through your authenticity. So along with a unique experience, we also have to create an engaging experience. We have to put people to work, what I like to say. And this is one of the stickiest things that we can do as a church. And actually, me and some of my elders, we disagree on some of this. So I don't know where y'all stand on this, so I'm just saying what I believe. But I believe one of the best things that we can do when a person comes the first time is the second time they come is put them to work. Find a way that we can get them plugged in and we can get them working. Now, I understand where my elders are coming from. Before we have people serve, they want them to be members so they can keep count of them. But I believe this is the way that Jesus brought people in. He wanted them to experience what he was talking about. It wasn't about checking off the list and meeting a standard before you got into it. I mean, he was picking up people off the streets, tax collectors saying, follow me, and they're like, okay, sounds good. It's pretty hot today, so I guess I'll go. Had no idea what they were getting into, but Jesus brought them in and let them be transformed through their work, not through checking things off the list. Being transformed through being involved in what God is doing, allowing that to transform them. And I think that's one of the powerful things he did. At Disney, on the plane here, we saw a bunch of little kids, and we're flying into Orlando. So if little kids flying to Orlando, they're going to Disney. They're the luckiest kids in the world. And there's a little girl there, and the first thing that went in my mind is, I wonder if that little girl is going to dress as a princess. And I almost wanted to whisper, hey, dress as a princess, because did you know at Disney, all the employees from the top to the bottom, if a little girl is dressed as a princess, are to treat her like a princess. They're to bow, curtsy, they're to call her madame, they're supposed to give her front line, announce her name, treat her like a princess. Why is that important? Why does that matter to Disney? Because they want bringing them into the experience. They want the little girl to experience, this is what it's like to feel special. This is what it's like to be a real princess. I want you to experience that. In every park that you go to, Disney, no if you're in Liberty Square, looking at all these cool things, the saggy hinges and the brown string down the street, do you know any park that you're in, you can't see other parts of the park in? No matter where you go, you can't see other parts of the park. Why? Because when you're in that world, you're in that world. When you're at the Wilderness Lodge, you can't see anything else. You're in the wilderness. When you're in the space, the Tomorrowland, you're in Tomorrowland. You can't see Liberty Square from Tomorrowland because you're in the future now. They want to bring you into the experience. And then every employment level are trained to go above and beyond. And here's the point that I'm trying to make with this. Find out where you are and embrace it. It's not about looking to be the next best thing. It's about where are you right now and can you fully embrace it. A lot of people are telling us as a Church of Christ that is a fairly good size that we need to be moving to instrumental. Now personally, we have no problem with instruments. We believe there are a lot of ways to worship God. We just prefer to use our voices. We think it's beautiful. And they think it's obsolete. Well, no, you need to go to musical instruments, you'll grow. I think it's the opposite. I think if we're really good at a cappella, people will want to experience it. It's something they've never heard before. We do Lenten services near Easter time, where all the churches, Church of Christ, Methodist, Catholic, we all get together and we do special services. We meet at a different church building and a different minister from that church speaks there. And when it's our turn to meet at our building, everybody comes. Why? Because they never hear a cappella music. They never hear it that good. And they always walk out blown away. Take who you are. So if you're all about unity, everything that you do should point to unity. If you're about service, about serving others, everything you do should point to service. If you promote love, everything you do should promote love. Embrace where you are and bring people into that experience. Don't try to just change to where everybody else is at. Again, authenticity over relevancy, that will be a common theme throughout this. And engaging experiences, they're not limited to just Disney. I mentioned that this is how I work. As a connections minister, the first thing I'm going to do is find out a way that you can get connected. Mary Beth, one of our members, you're not going to believe me whenever I say this, she went from witch, and that's not me being derogatory, a witch, practicing witch. She went from witch to greeter to Christian. I don't know how it worked. God worked. God did it. She came. She said, I said, do you want to hold open doors for people? Sure. And next thing you know, she getting baptized. So amen to that. God works in mysterious ways. Andrew and Dana. Andrew has the mental capacity of a fifth grader. He's probably 30 years old. His wife is handicapped. And I'm not speaking bad about it. We've had many talks with them. They smell horrendous. They smoke, and they don't know how to take care of their body. Their teeth are rotting out. But they have a yearning to be a part of what God's doing. 2 Sundays ago, Andrew served the Lord's Supper. He was one of the passing out the trays. And then he worked back in the children's wing with Bible Bucks. It's like a convenience store. You bring your Bible or something. I don't know what they do back there. They do all kinds of stuff in the children's wing. But he works back there. Helping out, putting them to work. John Morgan, we have really bad mental health problems in Norman. We have the highest population of mental health in all of Oklahoma, in Norman, Oklahoma. And John Morgan is one like this. He came, I met with him for over a year, and he would talk for 2 hours, and I just sit and listen. Because no one would just sit and listen to him. And finally, he said, I want to do something. We had a wall that needed to be painted. Hey, John, have you ever painted before? No, but I can try. Go for it, man. Here's some paint. Just go. You just got to get it colorful. Right? What ways, and there's small ways, can we bring people into what we're already doing? Madison is a millennial. She came back to the church. Now she teaches back in the youth or the children's wing. She's been teaching for over 3 years. That's how she connects. Sonia is one that I'm working on. Now get this. She's a Muslim. She goes to our church. Her husband was raised as a Christian, but she is the reason they come to our church. A Muslim brings her husband to our church. I remember sitting down in a Bible study with them, and she said, I believe in Christ more than he does. And they come, and I'm trying to find a way to get them connected. I'm trying to find a way to get them to serve. How cool would it be to have a lady wearing the full garb coming on Sunday morning, greeting people? I think that's beautiful. And I think God is working in her heart. And I think God is working through how the church can use her. You see, Jesus used incompetent people all the time. We put polished people up on the stage. I'm not one of them, don't look at me. I think I'm more of the incompetent side. The people that Jesus used didn't look like Tracy. I'm sorry, Tracy. You're not his style. Okay, right? Jesus didn't. Jesus used the fisherman. He used the tax collector. He used the lepers to go and tell what has been done to you. He told the women, the outcast women at the well. Jesus used incompetent people all the time to spread his message. Yet we look to polish people on the stage to do all the evangelism, to do all the teaching, when it's us. And I'm not calling you incompetent. It's everybody. God can use everybody to advance his mission, to advance his message. Millennials, they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Millennials have the world at their fingertips and they don't know what to do with it. Do you know this is the first generation, it's not mine, but the one just below me is the very first generation that will grow up with the internet. From birth to death, they'll grow up. I'm assuming we'll have the internet or some form of it in the future. They'll grow up with it their entire life. That means they will grow up with unlimited knowledge at their fingertips. Kids are no longer dependent on elders to receive information. It's no longer passing down information. They no longer look to older people to get it. They can find it on their own. So now we have to find a new way to communicate with them. And I'll get to it, I promise. Kids grow up with the internet. Here's a stat, and this is from a guy much smarter than me. Psychiatrist did studies on this, so I can find you the article if you want to read it. But the average high school student today has the same level of anxiety as the average psychiatric patient in the 1950s. Wow. The average high school student today has the same level of anxiety as the average psychiatric patient in the 1950s. Why? Because I think it's a turning head. That's superficial. It's just things plastering us.
It's worse now with all the school shootings.
Yeah, and I don't want to go down the results of it, but I think we're seeing some of it in our news. Depression levels are at their all-time high. Again, we have all this knowledge, but kids, they don't know what to do with it. Millennials, we don't know what to do with it. We don't know how to use it. We're the very first generation to ever have this problem. To have unlimited knowledge, but not know how to apply it in our life. To not have to look to older people to walk us along, to thinking we know it all, to have all the answers, but we come to reality and realize learning it and applying it are completely different things. And you can't fault us for it. You didn't know how to teach us about it. We don't know how to manage it because it's the first time for both of us. Right? You're the first group of parents, or at least all parents with kids in this generation. You're the first group of parents that had to raise kids in this world. I have sympathy for you. I don't envy my mom at all for raising me and my brothers and sisters. But the thing is that we were designed by our Creator to live in community. The world isolates us. Our phones, they isolate us. But we were designed to live in community. Let us make him in our image. There's community, there's plurality, there's multiplicity, there's multiple things there creating us. Let us make him in our image. And when man was alone, what did God have to do? Well, first he created animals. What did it do? He had to create somebody else. We were designed to live with other people, to interact with other people. Belief plus capability equals engagement. Bring people into, connect with people. Again, people are designed to be in community, so bring them into the community. Find out where their passions are, find out where their capabilities are, and that's where you stay. What are people passionate about? What are people capable of? And that's where they need to be engaged at. So that's my math. That's the limit of my math knowledge. So, and the question I always get when I talk about this is, how do you know who to invest in and who not to invest in? How do you know where the dead end is and where someone who's going to prosper is? I mean, how do you make that distinction? Where do you really invest in them? Where should your investment go? And I think we're looking at it completely the wrong way. In John chapter 6, right, Jesus taught, I am the bread of life. You're to eat my flesh, drink my blood. And many people didn't like that and walked away. People that Jesus invested in, and they walked away. Did that stop Jesus? I think if you would have asked Jesus about that incident, he would have said it was worth it. 100% worth it, even the ones that walked away. Jesus, he loved and invested in Judas the entire way through. He loved him to the very end. And I think he would have said it was worth it. Jesus is the model for making disciples. And we'll talk about this. I'm going to say this a lot. We're going to talk a lot about this on Sunday, about Jesus' model of making disciples, of transforming people. So you'll have to come on Sunday. But I'm pushing you to Sunday in everything that I said. But Jesus' model was to love, to invest, and to transform. He loved them, he invested in them, and that's what transformed them. We don't have to wait until the perfect scenario or until we have all the right words. We just need to love now. Love people now. Love more. Everything that you do, love more. And then the final one, and this will end our first session. How am I doing? Am I doing good?
Yes,
I am doing good. All right. We'll see. I can take this to, I won't take very long. The next one is, so we talked about creating a unique experience. We talked about making an engaging experience. And the final one is creating, and this is all about attracting. How can we attract people, get their attention? Making a relatable experience. How can we make a relatable experience? You see, stories are at the bedrock of our communication. We love stories. Now, it didn't used to be this way. A few years ago, we didn't tell through verbal stories or visual stories. We told stories through text. Now, whenever I talk about stories now, I'm talking about verbal and visual. Professor Thomas Patet at the University of Southern Denmark, he calls this the Gutenberg parathesis. What he basically means by that is we're having a reverse of when the Gutenberg press came out. Before, we were all visual or oral. We told stories orally. We passed them down. We did pictures on cave walls, and that's how we told stories. But then the Gutenberg press came out, and words became the primary form of passing information. And I'm not saying we get rid of books. I mean, I read probably a book a week. I love books. If we get rid of books, my hobby is going away. But we're talking about, what Thomas Patet is saying is that the Gutenberg parathesis is we're almost going full circle. We're moving away from text and we're moving back to visual, we're moving back to oral. Think about how kids communicate or what they're involved in. Think of billboards you pass by. That's a 10-second story right there. They have to tell you a story, convince you to buy something, and the time it takes for you to drive by. That's a visual story. Think about movies, the popularity of movies these days. Those are visual stories. Think of podcasts and radio and music. It's always becoming more and more popular as books are becoming more and more obsolete. I think we're going full circle. And the reason I say all of this is because I think the church needs to do better at telling stories. The church needs to do better at telling people of how God is working in the world. And share those stories with them. I want to tell you a story. It's a story of a girl named Alexa. Now, a lady at our church, she overdosed on Xanax. And we don't know the reasons for the overdose, but after threatening suicide and after being hospitalized, we knew we needed to find a place for her 16-year-old daughter. Now, thinking quickly, the man in charge of our CR program, our Celebrate Recovery program, he gave Gary and I a call. He said, listen, she's in the hospital. Alexa, the 16-year-old girl, she doesn't have anywhere to stay. She stay at your house for the weekend at least, just to as we get things settled down. And of course, without missing a beat, my wife said yes, and so I don't want to tell you the story to glorify us, but the story is about the church here, because the man, as we're confirming this commitment, he said, "Oh, but here's the twist. Tomorrow's prom night for this girl." So now you have a 16-year-old girl. Her mom just overdosed on Xanax in the hospital, threatening to take her own life, and it's prom night. She has no one to go with. But instead of allowing this girl to be swallowed by her life circumstances, the church came. And the church arose. You see, she was beautified and complimented by God's people. Women of the church came around this girl. They took her out, got her hairs, her nail, her makeup done, took her to a field, got her pictures, complimented her, lifted her up. A girl that could have been swallowed was loved. And then 5 women of our church, including Darian, they took her out to dinner, had this big meal, had dessert. She went to prom all by herself, but she went with confidence. She had a great time. And this is what church is. This is why the world needs the church. And this is how we're going to reach younger people, is by telling these kind of stories. No longer can we sit in a room and simply talk about God. No longer can we go on church on Sunday to see God and then go back to our lives. One thing I'm going to be talking to the youth about on Sunday morning in our classroom is that God doesn't sit in the church building and wait for you to come back. God's active in this world. We just have to tell the stories of the ways that He's active. We have to become storytellers. Younger people want to be captured by these stories. They want to be drawn into the exciting things that God is doing in the world. And I think of Jesus when I say this. I think of all the ways that He interacted with people, the way He taught people. You think about it, Jesus could have done things a lot differently. He could have made things a lot clearer. He could have said, black and white, here's what you do, here's what you don't do it the right way, you get to go with me. Now I'm getting out of here because you guys are crazy. Right? He could have done things a lot differently, but He didn't. He told stories. He told parables. He took the deepest truths and almost like He buried them in stories so that generations could slowly uncover what that truth is. And it would take us years and years and years to uncover it, only to go full circle and realize we didn't understand it at all. Right? It keeps us in the text. It keeps us gripped and excited about what God is doing in the world. These stories are relevant to us. They're exciting to us. I think that's why Jesus told them. I think that's why it wasn't just, here's what you do. But let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a story of what God is doing. And I think that's why we have Jesus' story. So that we have a story to tell. Let me tell you a story about the greatest man who walked this earth. Let me tell you about a real superhero. Let me tell you about power that you've never seen before. I've seen a sickness like this before. I've seen it be healed. Let me tell you a story. I think that's what excites people. In Disney franchise, they've built their entire empire on stories. Right? They've made millions, billions of dollars on stories. They tell stories better than anybody else, and they have hundreds of them. If you go to Disney, you'll see hundreds of different stories and people living those stories out. The church, we just got to master one. We just got to tell one story. And the good thing going for us is the greatest story ever told. We just have one story, and church is hiring people, and this is the last thing I'll say, but church is hiring people all the time to develop your vision, to develop your purpose statement. And I think, I'll come in and do that for you if you want to pay me money to do it, but I think Jesus has already done it. Jesus has already told us what our vision is. I think He did it in 2 places. The first one was Matthew 23, the Great Commandment. When asked, Jesus, of all the things that you said, all the things that I know, all the things that I've witnessed, what's the greatest thing? What's the thing I need to walk away with, right? What's the real kernel here? What's the greatest thing ever? What does Jesus say? Love. part, the second greatest, to love others. To love others in the way that you love God. Love others. There's a vision statement right there. I think we complicate faith a lot of times. We have a list and we say, well, if you want to be faithful, you just kind of go down this list and you'll be set. I know that's cliche to talk about a checklist, but think about it. What qualifications do people have? What expectations do we put on people before we allow them to get to Jesus? You have to go through us before you get to Him. Love God and love others. So, simplify our vision, simplify our faith, and I think the second part of that, so the greatest commandment, and then the second part can be found in Matthew 28, right, the Great Commission. Now, I want to say one thing about the Great Commission, because I think it scares a lot of people. Right? We think we make disciples, we get teaching people, and then we get to this part where it says all of the world, and we freeze up. And we think, how am I supposed to go into the world and love everybody, to develop disciples of the whole world? That's unthinkable. There's no way that I alone can do that, and we get stuck in that mentality that we just shut down. We think, well, somebody else can do that. I'll just try to do a little bit of my part. I think we should look at Acts chapter 1, verse 8. There's a powerful passage in there that I think we look over a lot of times. It talks about receiving the Holy Spirit, and then it says, you will be my witnesses in all of Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the world. So why is that significant? Look where it starts. You will be my witnesses where? Jerusalem. Right where you are. Vero Beach, this is your Jerusalem.
Yes.
So my question is, before you look to the world, look outside your front porch. Look at the houses, your neighbors. Are you actively loving them? And I don't know if you are or not. I'm not saying you're not. I'm not saying you are. I'm just asking. In what ways are you loving the people that are in front of you right now? In what ways are you investing in those people? Are you making disciples out of those people? And it's not just your neighbors, the people you go get the same coffee every morning. You know their name. Do you know someone's name is the most powerful thing that you can say in any language? If you know someone's name, you just said the most impactful word in every language. Saying people's name, learning the name. Starts here. And then we move out. But we can get a gauge of where we are in all of this, how we're doing right where we are. So, that was a lot. We just looked at attracting young people with Disney magic. And I think we're going to take a break here in a second, but to review, just a quick, for those who weren't taking notes, how dare you? Don't look over. Nobody who took notes, don't make copies for those other people.
Amen.
Yeah, that's right. Amen. It's only amen I'll get. So we talked about being first authentic. It's not about being relevant. It's not about having the hippest church, the biggest church, the loudest music, all the fog machines. I don't even think millennials like those things. We think they do, but they don't. At least I don't. It's not about being relevant. Right? Jesus' message wasn't relevant. And I put that in quotes. I think you understand where I'm coming from when I say that now. But Jesus wasn't relevant. He was authentic. Be authentic in everything you do. And pay attention to those details, because young people, your guests, they are. I wasn't going to say this, so if it doesn't go, I know. We were on House Hunters, my wife and I. That's a whole thing. We can get into it, but the house we live in now, we were on the television show House Hunters, and they tell us you can always tell which house someone's going to buy because they already know it. Right? They've already been in that house. And so whenever you go into a house, a new house you've never seen, what do? You look everywhere. You notice everything. You see the paint chip. You see the carpet turned up. You see the light switch is missing or whatever. I don't know why a light switch would be missing, but it's missing. And you notice it, right? Every detail you notice. But a house you've already been in, that you already know about, you don't. So if you ever watch House Hunters, the ones that they're looking around, that's a new house. The one that they don't. Anyways, my point is details matter to guests. Right? Details matter to young people. And it's not just in the building. I'm not just talking about physical. I'm talking about your life. The details of your life They matter to young people. That's why authenticity hits a home run, right? You'll have baseball stuff here, right? You have a lot of baseball stuff here, so at least I'm hanging out with Tracy, so I hear a lot of baseball stuff you'll have here. Authenticity. Pull people in. We talked about an engaging experience. Pull people into what God is doing in the world, what God is doing in this church. Right? Don't wait. Don't be a bouncer to God's club. Right? Don't be a bouncer checking people off before they're allowed to go in. Right? Love people and bring them in. Yeah, they're going to be imperfect. Yeah, they're going to be messy. Yeah, a lot of them are going to walk away. A lot of them are going to say, that's not for me right now. It's always worth it. It was always worth it to Jesus. It should always be worth it to us. Pull people in to what God is doing. And then finally, number 3, tell stories. Give them a relatable experience. Yes, how God worked, how Jesus worked way back then, it's interesting, but maybe not to everybody right away. What are we talking about what God's doing right now? God's just as active, God's just as alive today as he was when Jesus was walking. As he was whenever he pulled he got Moses and all those people, the Israelites, and they were in the desert, right? Jesus was just as active then, in Jesus' time, as he is today. Why are we telling those stories? So give people an authentic experience, give people an engaging experience,